I believe that great leaders are great coaches, right? So I think that they need to build up their coaching skill base. And very often leaders don't view that as a critical skill that they need. They think, okay, well, I need to learn how to manage my team. I need to learn how to read a financial statement. I need to understand the product. I need to know the competition. I need to, understand maybe the technology that builds the product. I need to understand all these things. But they don't consider that coaching is very critical. And I would say to you, it's extraordinarily critical. I think the biggest mistake that leaders do is they don't really take the time to reflect. And that's from a strategy standpoint, a personal standpoint. They're just like on this treadmill of doing, right? Like they're just on this, and they just need to step off for a minute. And I think that's the really, truly biggest mistake.
I'm joined today by President and Founder of Frame of Mind Coaching and the Journal Engine software, recognized as a pioneer in the field of leadership coaching and thought mastery. My guest today is Kim Ades, who uses her unique philosophy and direct coaching style, which we'll get a taste of in this conversation, to help leaders focus their thinking and achieve extraordinary results. So we'll be talking about that frame of mind question, the power of coaching in leadership as well as for leaders, and some of the common challenges that leaders face, the mistakes we tend to make, the biggest lessons that Kim has to share from over 20 years of working with leaders. So stick around. It's a great conversation. I know I say that every week, but I believe it every week as well. So do let me know what you think. Comments and reviews always welcome.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Kim, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be talking to you today.
Yeah, about a subject that we share a passion in as well, I'm sure.
I love my subject, so I'm happy to talk to you.
Well, let's start off then with a bit about you. Tell us about your background, your career so far, what you do today and why you do it.
Well, I run a company called Frame of Mind Coaching, and I've been doing that for close to 21 years. And basically, we coach leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, what we call the highly driven population, really worldwide. I've got a team of coaches in Canada and the US, and we have a very unique way of coaching leaders in a way that goes very deep, very quickly, and it's designed to create transformation in a relatively short period of time.
And tell us a bit more about your journey to get to that point, like what brought you into coaching?
So I was always a studier of leadership. I was always interested in that ever since my university days, but I'm also a what you call a serial entrepreneur. And so I owned a business before this one, and we used to build simulation-based assessments. And the purpose of those assessments was to help companies make better hiring decisions. And we tested literally hundreds of thousands of people. And what we were interested in is what determines top performance. Is it their personality? Is it their education? Is it their experience? Like what really makes someone a better performer than anyone else? And what we discovered was very interesting. And it was that it didn't matter what field, it didn't matter what age, it didn't matter what, how many years of experience. There was one key differentiator between top performers and other people, and that was their degree of emotional resilience. When people had a higher level of emotional resilience, they were much more likely to succeed in the long term than others. And so that was a piece of my history. The second piece of my history was that I ended up selling my business, and I got recruited like within a few weeks to work as the VP of marketing for a coaching company here in Toronto. And I lasted about 9 months. I lasted 9 months, which was, I think, long for me, because I think of myself as being unemployable. Once you're an entrepreneur, it's super hard to work for anyone else. But also I had a chance to observe how they coach. And I felt with every fiber of my being that they weren't doing it right, that they were missing something very, very important. And I felt that I could do a better job. And so that's when I created and I started Frame of Mind Coaching, and I started coaching leaders a long time ago. But that's what brought me here.
Yeah, and I mean, a 20-year milestone as well. I mean, that must be cause for celebration recently as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I feel my age catching up to me now.
An impressive figure to reach, isn't it, in business these days? I don't know what the stats are like in Canada, but certainly here in the UK, and I think similar in the US, I mean, it's less than half of businesses survive 5 years, let alone 20. So
yeah, I think for me, the reason I survived, because certainly there were hard times, but I think the reason I survived is because I could never imagine myself doing anything else. I could not imagine myself getting a regular job. I couldn't imagine myself being in a different business. I couldn't imagine myself like waking up and not doing this. Like, this is just like a natural extension of myself. So it's, you just get up and you do it, whether it's a good day or a bad day, because it's just, it turns into, it is who you are.
Yeah, there's that, having that purpose, finding your why, all the other kind of buzz phrases. And I think once you do find it, I'm with you there. It's very difficult to imagine yourself doing anything else.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me, like, what would you do if you sold your business? I said, I'd probably do this. Right? Like,
start another one. Yeah.
Well, it's not even just start another one. I would just keep doing it, because like, that's just how people knock on my door and say, hey, can you help me with this and this and this? And I'm like, how do I say no? You can't say no for me.
Yeah. I mean, do you not find though, like saying no at the right times or to the wrong
I know.
things?
But when somebody is asking for help with something that you're intrigued by something you're engaged with, by something where you really want to find out why this problem exists, it's just so compelling to me, right? So it's not like saying no to a party that you don't want to go to. I'm all for that. It's not like saying no to work that is not the best use of your time. I'm all for that. But when somebody's asking you for help with something that is absolutely in your sweet spot, then for me, it's hard to say no.
No, I get it. Yeah, it can be a challenge though, especially when you're a small business, can't it? Like, I mean, how do you keep all those plates spinning?
Well, again, I don't think you're saying yes to everything. I think you're saying yes to the thing you love the most. And I think that, a lot of entrepreneurs, because I work with business owners, they get caught up in, it's not that they say yes to everything, but they get caught up in doing everything. And a lot of the work that we do together is figure out what should we remove from your plate. So we do a lot of that. And what we want to do is we want to leave people working on mostly in their zone of genius, or their highest area of contribution. Some people don't even know what that is.
That's a very good point as well. Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't know what it is, like, how do you find out? Number
one is we do a time audit, right? And we just look at, what are you spending your time on? And if we look at all the things you're spending your time on, where do you feel the most lit up? Where do you feel the most engaged? And then we really take a step back and say, if you are running a business, what is the single most important area of contribution that only you can make? What can be replaced here? What can we offload? What can we delegate? What can we teach somebody? But what here is uniquely attributable to you? And let's keep you there.
Especially for entrepreneurs, I think we are quite prone as a group of people to burnout. Partly, I think, because we take on too much in exactly that way. So I think being aware of that and then taking those steps to like target the place where you can have the most impact, where your zone of genius, to use your phrase, which I do like as well. So I think, that kind of way of thinking is quite important. which sort of leads in from burnout back to what you're saying about emotional resilience. So we talked quite a bit about resilience on the podcast earlier in this year. The emotional aspect of it, though, is interesting to me. Like, do you see those as two distinct concepts, like resilience as a general thing and then emotional resilience specifically? And if so, what's the difference?
I don't see it as a different thing, because I think in order to be resilient, we have to have a certain way of looking at things. And so, let's kind of define emotional resilience for a minute. Everybody has setbacks. Everybody has blows. Everybody has failures. Everybody has negative experiences. It's part of our life's journey, right? So we have a negative experience, and people with emotional resilience, they fall just like everybody else. They take the blow, but they get up faster. And so they bounce back from adversity with greater speed and agility. And I would even add that they leverage the adversity in some capacity. So they turn it into an advantage. They say, what do I do with this so that it becomes a strategic advantage? And so they think differently, and they say, okay, this thing happened to me. It's not a good thing. It's not a happy thing. It didn't feel good. It kind of hurt, but I can't stay here, and I can't let this thing define me. So where am I off to next? And how do I take this thing and turn it into a win for me?
I like that definition. Yeah. One I've heard before as well, which I also quite liked that you've hinted to there, is someone I had on the podcast earlier in the year referred to it as bounce back ability or bounce ability.
Bounce back ability. That's me.
I think he said it. Yeah, I think it was bounce ability. I can't remember now. I'm going to have to go and check. But it was something around making that word funny, which I always
bounce
enjoy.
Back ability. I use that word all the time.
Yeah. Makes me think of that song, doesn't it? I can't remember who it was in the 90s, Getting Knocked Down. Anyway, let's get back on track. I don't want to go down the music route. We'll be there.
I'm in the music route all the time. I always have a song in the back of my head. So now you started me thinking about what is that song? Got knocked down, got back up.
That's
again. That one, but yeah. I can't sing. I have a problem with holding tunes, but I know the one you're talking about.
That's going to be rattling around in both of our heads for the rest of the day now.
My God, it really will be.
So tell us more then about your frame of mind coaching and that approach. Like, how does that work, and how do you really get deep quickly? Because that feels like it's a contradiction.
Really? How come? Why does it feel like a contradiction?
Depth implies time to me, but
depth does imply
happy
time.
To be proven wrong.
Yeah, no, but you're actually correct. Depth implies time. So the question is, how do we cover a lot of time in a short window? So normally, how does coaching work? You have a call with your client or a session, an in-person session with your client, let's say once a week, once every 2 weeks. And so every week you're basically catching up, right? And so what do we do with our clients is that we have calls every week as well. We have Zoom sessions and we record every session. The reason we record the session is so the client can listen to the session again and hear themselves speak, hear what they say, hear the words they use, hear the stories they tell, and start to pay attention to where they are struggling over and over again. And also start to pay attention to whether or not the areas where they struggle are repetitive. The second thing we do, and here's where the time factor comes in, is we ask our clients to journal in a private and secure online journal every single day for the duration of their coaching period. And we usually start off with 10 weeks. So what happens is at the beginning of the week, they receive a journaling prompt and they start journaling. And every time they journal, which is daily, their coach is on the other side of that journal, reading and responding to that journal. So imagine you're in a conversation with your coach every single day. So you talk about time, and what we're doing is we're maximizing the time together. As a coach, what I'm doing is I'm extracting a very important and wide breadth of data from my client. What does that data do for me? It allows me to understand how they think, how they're wired, how they approach problems, how they see the world, how they feel about things, how confident they are. It allows me to really look at their belief systems and how their beliefs impact what they do, what they don't do, and ultimately the results they're getting. And with that exposure, right, with that visibility, I'm able to coach very, very effectively and it's not only timely, but it's relevant, right? Timely, relevant, with high impact because of that data. And what I find is that most coaches are trying to coach without enough information.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense to me, and I like that layer of depth and the self-reflective piece as well, which I think is quite important in learning and development as well, not just for coaching. I guess two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways, aren't they? But
right.
Yeah, that's intriguing to me. I like it.
Well, what it also does is it allows the client to not only see what's going on with them, but to create change that is sustainable because of the level of self-reflection that is going on. And that's important. Like, how many times have you worked with somebody, a trainer, a coach, somebody, and you like, it's good for the time being, and then it disappears?
Yeah, I think there's a reason, I mean, especially in the leadership space, why there's so many sort of one-off courses and the learning doesn't really stick, and you'll maybe apply it for a few months after you finish your training course, and then next year you have to do another one because you've forgotten it all. And yeah, it makes sense to me. And I love that extra bit as well of like listening to their own recording, because it's really hard to argue with your own words.
Exactly. And it's hard to argue with your own writing, right? So
True,
if
yeah.
you're journaling and you write a whole bunch of stuff down, and I start asking you questions about what you've written down, what are you going to do? You're going to go deeper, and you're going to peel back the layers, and you're going to really pay close attention to, why you think the way you do. Why do you behave the way you do? Why do you see the world the way you do? And does the way you see the world align with the goals that you have? Or does it actually kind of clash? And what we find is a lot of times the way people think takes them away from their goals. And they wonder why they're struggling so hard.
Yeah, it's another one of those parts of human nature that is fascinating, isn't it? Defying logic, as always. But
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I think we're sort of circling around the subject of my next question for you. But, we've covered, I think, there why coaching is really powerful for leaders themselves. Now, why do you think it's also a really useful skill for them to have that they can then apply for others and the people they're leading?
Well, I believe that great leaders are great coaches, right? So I think that they need to build up their coaching skill base. And very often leaders don't view that as a critical skill that they need. They think, okay, well, I need to learn how to manage my team. I need to learn how to read a financial statement. I need to understand the product. I need to know the competition. I need to, understand maybe the technology that builds the product. I need to understand all these things. But they don't consider that coaching is very critical. And I would say to you, it's extraordinarily critical. And here's what we see. We see that when leaders learn how to coach, there's less turnover. Their employees are dramatically happier. They're more loyal. They have less sick days. They're more productive. They're happier to be in this job. But what's even more interesting, okay, so it's impacting ROI, it's impacting profitability, all that stuff. But what's even more interesting is that leaders who have coaching skills are themselves significantly more fulfilled and satisfied in their jobs. They don't get as burnt out because they feel like they're making a substantial difference, not only towards the goals of the company, but towards the development of their team. That's massive.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the list that you went through there at the beginning about things leaders think about, I think most, if not all of those, I wouldn't necessarily consider leadership skills. Like management, definitely. But
Yeah.
And I think that's quite telling, isn't it? Is people don't think about the skills that are actually relevant for leadership and the things that actually make the most difference to the people they're leading, and therefore by extension to all these other things like productivity and morale and happiness and job satisfaction, etc.
And even when we think about like leadership, and I've worked with so many leaders and it's consistent, what we find is that most leaders are looking for productivity gains by changing or attempting to change behavior. Okay, so I just want them to do X, Y, and Z. Right? So it's the action they're looking for. Like, and what they're also upset about or frustrated with is sometimes they notice that there's a change in behavior, but it doesn't stick. They revert back to old behavior. And I try to help them understand that behavior follows thought. First we think, then we behave. And what leaders are trying to do in their positions as leaders to be influential and impactful leaders is they focus on the actions, the productivity, what are they doing? And my job is to help leaders understand that they have to precede that by really focusing on how their employees are thinking. And if they're not focused on their thinking, they get short-term change. Because if your brain doesn't follow what you're doing, your brain will always, it's like an elastic. It will always bounce back to where it's used to being. And so...
Yeah, and I see that very... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say leaders are shocked when they see that they're missing half of the equation, which is I need to focus on how this person thinks, how they see the world, what they believe to be true, and then look at their behaviors.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, I guess, a small example of that to me is this. It's the thing where when leaders argue against being like fully transparent or open with people about, that whole sort of, I'm in charge, I say jump, you ask how high, that sort of mentality. And it's a very similar phenomena, I think, if you explain to people the context of like the why, how that's contributing to the wider goal, what their role in the big picture is, that sort of conversation. It's the same kind of difference, isn't it? Because if you take the jump how high approach, people will do it in the short term. They're like, okay, well, I'm not happy about it. I don't understand why I'm doing it, but the boss is getting upset if I don't do it, so I'm just going to do it. Whereas if you explain to them why, they'll be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Yeah, of course I need to do that. And that will stick for the longer term.
Well, let's dig a little deeper. Okay. Because I still think that's a pretty surface conversation. So let's dig a little deeper. Okay.
Yeah. No,
so
it's a small example. Yeah.
So I don't disagree with you. I agree with you. It's important for people to understand why they need to do what they're doing. But have you ever noticed that even when people understand why they need to do it, they still don't do it? Like, take anything, take weight loss. I understand why I need to lose weight. I understand how I need to lose weight, but I can't get myself to do it. So why is that? So for me, the question is not why. What's your why? Because your why and my why in life is very much the same. The reason we do anything is because we believe that it will make our lives better, right? That's our why. So the question isn't why. The question is why not? What's getting in your way? What's stopping you from doing what you know you need to do in order to reach your goals? What's actually interfering here? And so we're very much, we're really, really super focused on the why. The why is interesting, but not critical. What's critical is the why not. What's tripping you up? Because even if you have a why, that doesn't mean you'll take the action necessary. It's the why not that stops you. And that's what we need to clear. That's what we need to get through.
It's a good point. I think I kind of agree with you that why isn't the question as well. I don't know if why not is the one I like either. The most interesting and compelling one I've seen, as someone phrased it to me, is we shouldn't be asking why, we should be asking who. And I think that's an interesting route to go down as well, because then it's about finding the right fit for the organization, and it starts right back at the recruitment process and all of that sort of thing.
But if we're not finding the who, the question is why not?
Yeah, fair point. Right? Fair point. I think, to me, I think like the underlying issue there is it's about alignment, isn't it? And it's about what the organization is attempting to do and why or why not or who. Any of these questions, yours is perhaps better in the way you've explained it. But.
Well, look, here's the thing. Organizations are run by people, and each person, especially those that are at the helm of an organization, have a set of beliefs. And those beliefs are related to what's possible, what's not possible, how to use resources, about, maybe a limitation of resources, about their team. The way they think about everything will determine what they do and what they don't do. And the way they think sometimes, not sometimes, always influences outcomes. And when that's the case and we're not getting outcomes we want, we need to really ask, how is our thinking impacting this outcome? And more interestingly is, what are the beliefs that are getting in the way?
Yeah. And that feels like a conversation that a lot of leaders don't want to have.
They don't know. They don't even
process.
Absolutely. They don't want to have that conversation. And it's overwhelming to them because it feels so intangible. But when we boil it down, it becomes super tangible.
Absolutely. But it can also be quite confronting as well. Like when it's not many people that will like honestly, objectively start to think about beliefs and biases and how what's in their brain might have affected a situation, a conversation, an outcome. And again, like we're back to human nature again, aren't we? It's much easier to just have an external point to blame or rationalize.
Yeah. But I would say to you that extraordinary leaders do challenge assumptions and are always looking at, like, how am I thinking about this? And how is this thinking actually keeping me stuck? What are the beliefs I have here that really don't align with the goals that I have?
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there.
Yeah. It's interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very interesting. And trying to think back to like experiences with leaders that I've had, and I'm sure that you have similar reflections or times when I've been in leadership roles, and trying to think of an example of a time when I actively avoided doing this or when I did it quite well. It's again, like you can get lost in the thought exercise, can't you? But it's so useful though to inform your future behavior.
Well, let's look at something really simple. There's somebody who's underperforming in your organization. What do you do about that? How many people just like let it run too long? How many people try to address it with a behavior change and don't see the change? How many people say, okay, I know I need to let them go, but I don't want to have that conversation? How many people say, I know I need to let them go, but I don't have a replacement. So for now, we're just going to suck it up. Like, right? These are very common conversations. So,
absolutely.
Right? And that's a reflection of how the leader is thinking.
Yeah. And I think that probably the most common one I've seen is I know some action needs to be taken, but that's going to be a really uncomfortable conversation, so I'm going to put it off.
Exactly. That too.
I've done that. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And it's back to why not, isn't it? You're right. You're swaying me.
I'm swaying you. There you go. And why not? Because it's going to be uncomfortable, because I'm going to hurt that person, because, it's going to be awkward. And then what's going to happen? And what if they don't find a new job? And what if, then it's going to be my fault, and that's not going to feel good. And maybe I wasn't a good leader. Maybe I'll give it another shot. Right?
Yeah. That self-doubt piece as well. Absolutely. But also, like, you can apply the why or the why not question to the situation as well, which sometimes can help you in how you address it. Like, so in the case of the underperforming employee, like, they're missing targets. Maybe they used to be like my highest performer. What's changed? Like, why are they not doing that anymore? Why are they off the rails, in inverted commas?
Yeah.
Which again, difficult conversation, difficult thought path to go down. People might not want to do that, uncomfortable stuff, and so on.
Exactly. And that goes back to, that's why leaders would benefit from coaching skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you enter that room with questions instead of accusations, the outcome will be miles different.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, really interesting though. You've provoked some thought there for the listeners as well, not just me, I'm sure. So let's talk a bit more about your life, your experience as an entrepreneur. Like, I mean, you described yourself as a serial entrepreneur earlier. So from the various businesses that you've been part of, that you've started, that you've run, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned about just running a business, keeping it going for 20 years?
Keeping it going for 20 years. I mean, I've learned a lot of lessons over the years. I think one lesson that I've learned is it's really, really important to experiment and to try new things and to, just like test things out. So just like a scientist is testing things out, I think it's very important to continue to test new ideas, new products, like just test, keep testing. So I like to call them pilots. I run a lot of pilots on a yearly basis. And so that tells me, okay, this worked, keep doing it. This really didn't work, put it aside. And so number one is I think I learned that running pilots is very important. The other thing is I think it's important to abandon failing courses of action very quickly. Even though you've poured tons of time, money, energy into it, you've got to sometimes say, okay, it's done. Right. We've put everything we can into this thing, and we need to know when to call it a day. And I think a lot of leaders don't know when to call it a day. And it could be like a project, an initiative, a hire, whatever it is. You need to know when to just pull the plug and stop, continuing to pour bad money after bad money or good money after, right? Like stop pouring money into it when it's not leading to the outcomes you're looking for. I think that's a tough lesson to learn because you're so like determined for things to work that you just keep trying and trying and trying. And like sometimes you just got to take a break. I also think that from a leadership standpoint, it is important to take a break and to step away from your business and take like a 50-foot view of the business and say, is it going where I want it to go? And really take some time for evaluation, take some time for self-reflection. So many leaders I work with say, I have no time for that. And it's so critical. Those are a few quick lessons off the bat.
Yeah, that whole "I have no time for it" argument, like I always find that frustrating. I always did as an employee when the boss would come out with that one, and it frustrates me now as well. In like any time I hear it in almost any context, and like intellectually, I get like the world we live in. It's all go all the time. There's emails, there's messages, there's everything flying at us all the time. And I can understand why it's easy to get in that mind space of like, I don't have time for anything. I'm super busy all the time. But I also think it's just a question of priorities, isn't it? Do you
Absolutely.
really need to spend 4 hours a day manually deleting all the junk mails in your inbox and replying to every email yourself and things like this? Or, I mean, it's back to what we were talking about earlier on, isn't it? It's like, what's the best use of my time? Where's my zone of genius? What should I be doing for the greatest impact? And it's, I do think it's prioritization. It's a little bit of mindset as well. And it's just having the, I guess, confidence, isn't it? To just say to certain tasks or even people like, no, and to others, yes.
Yeah. This aligns, this doesn't. It's funny. You were talking about emails. I was laughing because this morning I was just like unsubscribing myself from a bunch of emails. It's overwhelming. It's too much.
Yeah. I was talking to someone else this morning about emails as well. And I was saying like, and this is totally true. Like, so 2 weeks ago I did that. I spent half a day clearing my inbox. And this morning, I've just passed 1,000 unread emails again. And maybe like 4 or 5 of those are work relevant. Most of them, it's just spams and mailing lists I don't think I ever joined. And it's just, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
But I'm not spending the time on it every day. That's the main thing.
I'm in an unsubscribe mode right now. Even to things that I've been following for like 3 years, 5 years. I'm unsubscribe. If I don't actively read something, unsubscribe.
Yeah, I agree. It's like that old saying, isn't it, about when you move house? If there's something that's still in a box and you haven't unpacked it after 6 months, just throw it away. You don't need it. It's the same thing with all these emails.
Yeah.
If you haven't read the last 2 or 3 of them, unsubscribe.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. There's productivity tip as well.
There you go.
Yeah. And then, so the other point you were making as well, I think is quite interesting about what's your trick? Like, how do you know when it's time? When is the point that you know something's failed and it's time to drop that and move on to another?
Honestly, I'm an entrepreneur like everybody else, and sometimes it takes me a little too long. But when I I look at my frustration level, and I look at like, am I reasonably frustrated, or am I unreasonably frustrated? And how long have I been frustrated with this same thing for? So if I keep being frustrated with this one, like, I'll give you an example. We had one program that we were just having a hard time filling. And there was a time when it was like our highest margin product. It was our highest yielding product year after year after year. It was the best thing we did. But then over time, it became harder and harder to fill. Harder and harder to fill. And so we would like say, okay, fine, we won't do it twice a year. We'll only do it once a year. But after a while, when you feel that frustration, like, we're banging our heads against the wall. This is not easy. It's not working. It's costing us more than it's yielding. Okay, let's call it a day. Let's stop doing this. It doesn't make any more sense. At one point, it made sense. Now it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, the examples that always spring to mind are like Kodak and Blockbuster and companies like that, aren't they, who didn't move with the times with the technology.
Exactly. I make a joke, right? I often make a joke, and I say, you see the blood on my head? That's me banging my head against the wall. If you see the blood on my head, that means it's time to pull the plug.
Yeah, we've all done it though, and I think that's part of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, isn't it? Is the reason you're doing it is because you really care about it. It excites you. You're passionate about it, so you don't want to feel like you're giving up on it, do you? And it's very difficult.
It's hard to give up on something that once worked, right? Well, it used to work. Why doesn't it work now?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I've had that particular problem. For me, it's normally giving up on something that isn't working, but I really believe it should.
That too.
That's the really difficult one for me.
Yes.
But yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other way to look at it is, as the business owner, you've got the freedom to decide, haven't you? So it's not like you've got to justify it to a management team or anything.
I think that often the idea is like, are you trying to force something? When you're trying to force something, that's also an indicator that it's probably not exactly the right use of time and energy, if it feels forceful.
Yes. Although again, there's a blurring of the line there, isn't there, between forcing it and just having to put in the work to get it to work. And again, like, there's a judgment call in there somewhere, I think, too.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I believe in effort for sure, but also I believe in effort that yields a result. And if over time that effort doesn't yield a result, like Facebook ads don't always yield a result, right? So like after a while, you're like, okay, like this is not a good use of my time, my money. Like, it's just not a good idea. I'm going to let that go. Try something else.
Yeah. That's one of my trigger phrases, actually. Yeah. Facebook ads.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah. It's a money drain, isn't it?
Money drain.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and it's a good example of, I think, the importance of setting out like the expectations, what's the goal in doing it, because that's something where it can be very easy to produce a result, whether that be like views of the ad or number of clicks or whatever. But if you haven't thought ahead, and this is a very simple example to make the point, but if you haven't defined before you start running those ads, like, okay, the outcome I want is X number of customers or Y amount of revenue or whatever.
Exactly.
It can be very easy to get kind of sucked in, deceived by it, because you go, oh wow, look at all these people looking at this ad. It must be doing really well. Great, yeah.
Yeah. And then what do? You're like, oh, let's pour more money into it.
Yeah.
Someone will make it. We just need more views. We need more eyes on that. And sometimes absolutely. You got to say, this isn't working.
Definitely. And I think it gets a lot easier to do that if, as I say, you've defined what what's the desired outcome at the beginning, which again is something a lot of business owners, leaders don't want to think about until it's too late.
Exactly.
I mean, you've kind of given us your top three there anyway, I think, but I was going to ask, is there any other advice that you would offer, particularly to a first timer or maybe an aspiring entrepreneur?
I mean, for me, one of the biggest pieces of advice is like, ask for help. Like, there are so many people out there that are willing to help, that are wanting to help, that are okay to help. And most of us sit there and say, well, I got to do it by myself. And I would say, no, there are a ton of resources right at your disposal. Some cost money, a lot of them don't. But ask for help. You're not, even if you're a solopreneur, you don't have to feel like you're in this alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree with that. And that's where I think things like networking and joining certain communities and things like that can be really powerful, especially for solopreneurs. And listeners have heard me bang on about this before, so I won't go into it again, but just underline the importance of that again.
Exactly.
Back to leadership then. 2 questions for you. First one, what's your biggest leadership lesson from your whole career so far? If you haven't already said it, you might have.
My biggest leadership lesson. You know what? Like, I've been studying leadership. I've been working with leaders for years and years and years. And we know that leaders typically struggle in one of 4 areas. And I'm happy to share those areas with you. But then I'll also share like what's the really big takeaway from all this. So the first area of struggle is that a lot of leaders feel very isolated. Like, they have a lot going on. They are surrounded by people, but they don't necessarily have people they totally trust. And so they keep a lot in. They're very selective about who they tell what to. And they are not completely open and vulnerable. And they carry a lot of burden on their shoulders alone, and they don't have a place to deposit it necessarily. So isolation is the first one. The second thing is that we see leaders struggle with what I call chronic dissatisfaction. So they are people who are achievers. They've achieved quite a bit. They've done a lot in their lives, but something bothers them at all times. Something niggles them. And it could be, well, we should be further ahead. It could be, why aren't we all rowing in the same direction? It could be like, why don't they have us the same level of urgency as I do? It could be like, we should be more productive. It could be, the competition is doing this. Why aren't we doing this too? It could be anything, but they're always in a state of like internal dis-ease and looking for that next thing. The third one is what I call friction with others. And we see 2 kinds of friction. One is overt friction, where these people have high expectations, people aren't meeting their expectations, so they have a battle. They have words, right? They raise their voice, they have anger, and it's very obvious and palpable. But the more common form of friction that we see is what I call covert friction. And we talked about this earlier, is that people aren't performing, but they don't have time to address this. And so they lift up the rug, they sweep it under the rug, and they move along with other things that are seemingly more important. And they are just frustrated with the people around them. Eventually that mound gets super big and it's not something they can ignore. But we see that very often as they hold it in. They're not expressing it, but they have internal stress. They have internal frustration, and it's hard for them to navigate that kind of dynamic. And the third thing is what I call slippage. So slippage is where these people are focused on work and they're very busy and they want to achieve, but they let a lot of other things slip through the cracks. Things like their health, their nutrition, their sleep. Maybe they're drinking too much. They come home after a long day. They sit on the couch. They watch Netflix, but not really, because they're on their phones at the same time. When they're at work, they're thinking, oh man, I should be home. What about my kids? What about my family? What about, when they get home, they're not present. They're having a hard time being present, and they have all sorts of guilt about where they should be and when they should be at that time. And so they're living with this internal state of dis-ease that often translates into physical illness in some ways. It's got like high blood pressure, then they're trying to ease the pain. So they're drinking. Some people are taking drugs, and on and on and on. And so they're always in this kind of state of trying to calm themselves down. emotionally, physically, and otherwise. And so, like, what did I learn? I learned one very important leadership lesson, and it's that the way we think has the single greatest impact on everything we do, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And so when we're not happy with our results, it's very important to go back and look at our thinking and our belief systems. And that's a superpower that a lot of leaders don't quite understand. Let's look at the way we think, right? Before jumping into the next plan or jumping into action, let's slow it down and really examine our thinking processes. And when we do that with leaders, the results they get are astounding.
On the subject of like the way we think, I mean, one particularly relevant example for that, for me, that I'm hearing a lot over the last year or so is this concept of reframing. And maybe it's been around, it probably has been around a lot longer. We've probably always done it. It's just now that seems to be, it's got a buzzword for it now. But anyway. And so in the context of some of the things we've already talked about, like the reflective learning and the thinking about and the way that you view mistakes or things that have gone wrong and how you can turn that into actually what have we learned from it? What will we do differently next time? And it's that sort of way, it's the way you think, like you say, like it's that how you process things that happen and then the result of the way that you've done that and the way you're thinking about it in terms of the outcome, what you do next, how you present it to the team, how people that you're working with feel about what's happened. It all comes from, you're right, like it's the way the leader has viewed it, thought about it, processed it, and then verbalized it usually. And the power involved in that, and therefore I think the responsibility in how you handle it, and whether you can take that positive but realistic view versus, the negative and damaging view or some middle road. It depends on the context as well, doesn't it? But yeah, it is an interesting one. So thank you for that. Great lesson.
Yeah. You learn all kinds of things as you go, right?
Absolutely. And so I guess opposite question really, what do you think is the biggest mistake that most leaders will make?
Sometimes they don't take action fast enough. Sometimes they take action too fast. And I think that they don't, what leaders do is I think the biggest mistake that leaders do is they don't really take the time to reflect. And that's from a strategy standpoint, a personal standpoint. They're just like on this treadmill of doing, right? Like they're just on this, and they just need to step off for a minute. And I think that's the really, truly biggest mistake.
Yeah. So, I mean, the common theme in all of those there is time, isn't it? Timing.
Timing, but also like understanding the value of that activity, right? So if you understood that it was that taking the time to actually think about what you're doing and how you're doing it and why you're doing it and what's getting in the way has this tremendous ROI, you would do it more often.
Yeah, that's certainly true, isn't it? Yeah. And it's something I think that plays into, especially that taking the time to stop and reflect on things. I feel like that's one of the really important things.
Yeah. And I would also add that one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is they don't take time to develop their leadership skills. And that includes their coaching skills.
Indeed. Well, I've said before, but the day you stop learning, you've stopped leading.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of these things as well, that leading by example is really important too, because especially if you're thinking for the future, further ahead, succession planning even, but just at a basic level, like live the behaviors that you want your people to display, because if you don't do it, why would they, right? Like, that's the other thing. I don't get people who don't do that.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me anyway.
It seems simple, right?
It does, which doesn't make it easy, of course. I acknowledge that, but still. So my next question might be a bit difficult for you, but I'm going to ask anyway. What would you say has been your best experience of being led?
Ooh, of being led. Um, I think my best experience of being led is when someone has given me a responsibility or a role that I didn't think I was cut out for. In other words, they saw me in a better light than I saw myself. They saw me as being more capable than I imagined for myself. Like I remember, I graduated with my MBA at a very young age. I was 23 years old. And I got a job right after that as a marketing manager for a software company. And in my brain, I'm like, wow, I don't think they're overqualifying me. They're putting me in a role that I don't think I'm really ready for. But they gave me the role, so I'll take it. And I stepped up into the role, right? And so I think that the best form of leadership is when the leader envisions your capacity in a way that's grander than your own vision of your own capacity and helps you live into that role, that vision, that contribution. That's what I think.
It's that last bit that's the key, isn't it? Is helps you live into it. And I think so. We talk a lot about this: the accidental managers, the people who exactly like they probably don't feel ready. They may or may not actually be ready, whether it's like an accurate self-assessment or it's imposter syndrome. But either way, nobody is really realistically going to say no, because you want the job, you want the advancement, you want the bigger paycheck. Human nature again, of course, you're going to accept it. So then I think where businesses go wrong, where we have this accidental manager who may well ultimately become a toxic manager if they're not otherwise supported, is that key bit, is the leader, right, I've pushed you in at the deep end, but also I'm going to teach you how to swim, and here's a life preserver as well, just in case.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was the greatest form of leadership for me, is to say, hey, like I can do this and I can do it well. And who knew? Right.
Yeah, that old imposter syndrome is tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whether it's justified or not.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, on that note, if you could start your career over again, would you do anything differently?
Of course, I do a million things differently. Of course, I do a million.
What would be the top
different.
one? Yeah,
I think for me, what's the top one that I would do differently? I think that I would more quickly hone in on my niche market and stay in that lane. Like figure out who your market is, figure out who your client is. I think it took us a little long to figure out exactly who they are and how to define them and what their personalities are like and what their struggle with and all that stuff. I think it took us a little long to do that. And so if I were to do it all again, I'd like start with that actually.
Yeah. I think that's another thing, isn't it, that entrepreneurs don't think about until too late. Yeah. We get overexcited, don't we, with the thing and the stuff.
Exactly. We don't always think of all the pieces. We just go do it.
Which isn't a bad thing. I mean, none of us would be doing what we do without that. But yeah, still, a bit of self-reflection doesn't hurt, does it?
No, never hurts.
Awesome. Well, time's been flying. We've been powering through all these questions, and I've only got one left.
Oh, wow.
It's my favourite one, though.
Okay.
So, no pressure at all. So it's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but that could be literally anyone you can think of. So they could be alive, dead, past or present, real or fictitious, even if you like. But it's somebody who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So who would that person be for you and why?
You know what? It's really weird, but the person who stands out to me is my mother. And she's gone, she's passed. But she came to Canada as an immigrant and didn't really speak English very well. And she got a role as a secretary at a bank. And she didn't know how to type. And so she was typing with two fingers, but worked her way up to becoming a bank manager for that, for a branch. And so why do I think of her as a leader? Because she used to come home from her job and share stories of her staff and how she treated them, how she took care of them, how she trained them, how she told them they shouldn't smoke because it's not good for them. And of course, it was many, many years ago, but she was demonstrating a lot of personal care, a lot of personal interest. She was also setting a very high standard of performance in her organization. But also, like, if I really look at where I learned my coaching skills from, they come from her in terms of how she raised us and how she taught us what was important and not important. And so for me, hands down, my mother.
You'd be surprised how often a parent or parents is the answer to this question, actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it's unusual at all. I don't think it's a crazy idea. It's very personal, actually. And I think for a lot of us, our earliest experiences of leadership is going to be our parents. So
Yeah.
it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I love that bit about like the caring behaviors as well, particularly at that point in, I don't want to call it history because
in history, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, it's living history, isn't it? That point in human evolution, let's say.
Yeah.
Certainly in like the history of business, that would have been quite an unusual thing for a manager to be doing, I suspect.
Yeah. She was just, it was easy, natural for her. She'd come home and say, my customers love me, and she just had a way with people that was very unusual. And she did her job with exuberance. She loved it. She was easy, natural.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is always infectious, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I'll add one more thing. The other thing she said, and I remember this, is that she would come home and we would have dinner and she would say, we are leaders in this family. And it like stuck on me as a child, like at a young age. I'm like, okay, well, if she's calling us a leader, then it must be so, right? So it had a lasting impression for me as a kid.
Well, there's that saying, isn't there, that leaders create leaders?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Case in point.
There you go. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that story as well. It's always lovely to hear those personal connections as well to this question. So thank you. Well, half a question left, really.
Okay.
If any of the listeners or viewers, because we might be on YouTube as well at this point, but if any of them would like to learn more about you, what you do, perhaps reach out, work with you.
Yeah,
how can they do that?
Well, come and find us at frameofmindcoaching.com. And if anything in this conversation struck you and you want to reach out personally, it's kim@frameofmindcoaching.com.
Lovely. And I'll pop those in the show notes down below so everyone can find it easily.
Perfect.
Well, Kim, thanks so much for being here again today. Love this conversation.
Thank you.
Very thought-provoking. You've challenged some of my leadership assumptions as well today. So thank you again. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Kim, for a thought-provoking leadership chat today. Listener or viewer, please do check those show notes down below for links to Kim's website and a selection of some of her socials as well. Go and visit those links, learn more about Kim, her approach, and the work that she does. And if you found this podcast, then I hope it's because you are new to leadership or new to business, perhaps a first-time founder or solopreneur. You're interested in knowing more about how to lead well. Perhaps you are looking for support or a community. If so, then please do pay a visit to www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Hit that green button and come and visit us at the Integrity Leaders online first leadership community. It's for new leaders, first-time founders, and fledgling managers who want to be more effective, people-first leaders. And if you're also a fan of science fiction, then you will fit right in. So join our virtual starship today and start getting to know your crewmates and colleagues on the grand voyage of leadership. Thank you for listening, watching, and supporting Leading with Integrity. That's all from me today. I will be back in a week with my next guest, inclusion strategist and author Delphia Howes, and we'll be chatting about diversity, inclusion, vulnerability, and trust in the modern workplace. So I hope you'll join us then, and until then, be a leader, not a boss.